Hi there. I am Dan Kaplan. I am Ms. Kaplan's brother, and I am in the United States Army. I'm in the medical corps, and Mrs. Kaplan, asked me to talk to you guys a little bit about Veterans Day and what it means. And so I thought before I talk about what it means to myself, I'd give a little bit of background about Veterans Day. Veterans Day was actually originally called Armistice Day, and it was founded in 1919 by Woodrow Wilson, who was the President of the United States at the time, to honor the end of World War I, which was like the biggest war that had happened at the time, and everyone was very happy that the war was over, and so they made a holiday commemorating the end of that war. And then in 1954, President Eisenhower signed a bill into law that changed the name of Armistice Day to Veterans Day because they wanted to honor the soldiers not just that served in World War I, but in all wars. And so the idea was that it would make it more inclusive, and thus we have today the modern Veterans Day, basically unchanged since 1954, which is what we have now. So what does Veterans Day mean to me? Well, as someone who has not served in a war yet, I am not a veteran myself, but in my role as a doctor who takes care of people in the Army and the other branches of the armed forces, I get to interact with a lot of veterans on a daily basis. And they're very inspiring people. They've persevered through a lot of hard times being in combat and a lot of the things that happen to you after combat. So having to deal with all of the emotional stress, having to deal with injuries, wartime injuries that are sustained. And so from my perspective as in the medical corps, that's where a lot of my time and effort is devoted. But Veterans Day and the original day, Armistice Day, are also meant to reflect on the solemnness of war, the seriousness of war, and how great it is to not be at war, and the importance of peace and finding other ways outside of war to resolve conflict. And so it's a very important day. I hope that you guys, even though you're in school, that you do take time to think about the importance of Veterans Day and think about maybe what it means to you personally. And I hope you have a fun time and enjoy the rest of your day. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to send them through Lisa or through Mrs. Kaplan to me, and I'm happy to email you back with responses. Okay, take care.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk to you a bit about Veterans Day and what it means to me. My father served in the Army right before the Vietnam War and actually lived with my mom in Germany for just over a year, right out of college. It is always interesting to think about that because of the dedication that he and so many of his friends and millions of others have had to our country. And that is evident when you see and hear about the amount of time they've spent away from their families and friends. Again, my father living in Germany with my mom for over a year, it put off their time raising a family, and I think is a strong testament to kind of the bravery of many like him and many others who served in actual combat. So we should pay respect to them on this day and every day.
The photograph you are looking at is of Robert George Boyd, 1st Lieutenant, 435th Anti-Aircraft, 473rd Infantry. He is the father of our own Mr. Boyd, bus mechanic. Mr. Boyd wants you to know that his father was proud of our country, but that he would want you to avoid war at all costs because everyone loses something in the end. He would be proud to speak to the students to tell them not to take any of their liberties that they have for granted. Mr. Boyd enjoys the freedoms we have, never forgetting the vets, past and present, who are willing to risk their lives to keep things the way that they are.
Happy Veterans Day! I'm going to tell you about my grandfather, Pasquale Pisano. He was drafted in the Korean War on January 9th, 1953. He was honorably discharged on January 8th, 1955. He was a corporal in the Army and assigned to food services as a butcher. Here are his honorable discharge papers. He was assigned to stay in San Francisco, California, which he always talked about until he passed away. My grandfather loved America because it was the land of the free and anybody could be what they wanted to be. So this Veterans Day, please thank a veteran. Thank you.
My father served in the Army Air Corps during World War II for 5 years. He was stationed in the South Pacific, and his tour of duty took him to Australia, to New Guinea, to the Philippine Islands, and his job took him to other places in order to perform his role as an airplane mechanic. But he was basically in the South Pacific in the tropical jungle areas. Fortunately, his work was not too stressful compared to a combat soldier. Being an airplane mechanic, he was able to be more sheltered, and he was lucky in that regard, and he came back alive after his 5 years of service. And thanks to his willingness to share with our family many of his experiences, we grew up learning a lot about world history, and we were able to gain multicultural understanding. I was grateful to learn a lot of what was happening during the war directly from my father, because it was his experience that he wanted to share. Although he did shelter us children from some of the horrors of war, I know that when soldiers return from war, they're not always able to talk about their experiences, and that's why probably my father could speak about it, since he only told us about the good things. One other thing I'd like to mention is that the men and women who served during World War II in the 1940s were called the Greatest Generation.
Hey, I'm Mrs. Annette, and you may see me down here in the cafeteria during the day, and there are 4 people that I want to talk about. My dad was in the Air Force when he was younger, and my brother-in-law Dan was in the United States Air Force, and then 2 of my nephews who I'm very, very proud of. My nephew Anthony is a petty officer second class in the United States Navy. And then this is my nephew who is Anthony's brother. That's my nephew David, who was an E6 staff sergeant in the Marines. I'm very, very proud of them because both of them on a daily basis fight for our freedom in this country. I worry about them. I think about them all the time. I hope that they are safe, and am very proud of them.
At the beginning of this video, you met my brother, Captain Daniel Kaplan, currently serving in the United States Army Medical Corps. There is another member of my family, though, that I would like to introduce you to. His name was Alan Milak, and he was my grandma's youngest brother. This is the last picture that we have of him. He fought bravely in World War II, but died at only 19 years old in the famous Battle of the Bulge. I'm telling you about my great-uncle Alan because his story is the reason we have Veterans Day in America. It is so important to both honor the veterans in our lives, but also remember those who sacrificed themselves for our freedom.